want to start with a little bit of self-reflection here. What I'd like you to do is think back to the moment you opened your eyes this morning. Right? Since that point, how many text messages have you received? How many Facebook messages? How many WhatsApps? Emails? We live in an age of information overload, where information is constantly flying around us at all times. So much so, there's research organizations dedicated to analyzing and quantifying the flow of information worldwide, particularly emails. Right? So what I want to do is I want to play bad teacher for a moment here, right, and pop a quiz on you. So one of these research organizations has gone deep into the details of the flow of emails worldwide. So just by show of hands, we're going to make it pretty easy here. Just by show of hands, A, B, or C. How many emails do you think were sent and received worldwide in 2016? Who says A, 2.5 billion? Do we have anyone out there who says A? Huh? How about B, 15 billion? Okay, a couple of 15 billions as well. Is anyone going to go out on a limb and say C, 215 billion? Okay. Very good. C, 215 billion. Round of applause, guys, for the guys who selected it correctly. We all know that praise is a very important part of the American culture here. So on one hand, we're occupying an age of information overload. And it's become so much so that at the end of the day, all we want to do is go home, plop on our couch, and turn ourselves off. Just like my little friend here. I took a video of him, and don't worry, he signed a video release form, so I'm allowed to use his image here. So, on the one hand, we occupy this age of information overload, but there's another complexity to this. There's another wrinkle. Long gone are the days where business was just business. Where academia was only academia, we now have to apply the adjective international and intercultural to these terms. Just look at the University of Michigan Dearborn here alone, right? 9.8% of the student body is comprised of international students. If we escalate, if we go, and if we talk about the economy of the United States, right, then we see as well, over 40 countries have invested then over $3.7 trillion in the U.S. economy. $3.7 trillion already. So what does that tell us? Well, on the one hand, we're occupying the age of information overload. So there's a lot of details flying around us at all times. And that means we have an extremely limited window of time to get people on board with our ideas. On the other hand, right, we have this complexity of interculturalism. So a one-size-fits-all approach is just not going to cut it. And we all know, we hear it all the time, success in international business is predicated upon one's ability to successfully, persuasively, and convincingly present a line of argumentation. But what do? Right? Right? So one thing that we can offer here, and this is the beauty. Fortunately, we have the intercultural sciences, the study of intercultural sciences. So this is the beauty of this, because what we can do is provide a sense of awareness for what is happening. So just to give you a little bit of background, we're not just focused upon how, for example, information flows. We're not just focused upon persuasion tactics and methodologies. We're also looking into how do people deal with each other in hierarchies? How do they make decisions? How do they solve problems, right? How do they communicate with one another? How do they as well lead in international teams? So we're focused on all of these things as well. And so the fortunate part is we do have the intercultural studies. Now the unfortunate part to this whole equation is that there is no magic approach to this. We cannot give you an overall solution to this. What we can offer you is this sense of awareness that we talked about, right? For what does work. And maybe even better, we can offer you some insights and sense of awareness into what doesn't work so well. I want to show you an example of what I mean here. So we're all accustomed here to these iPhone email smartphones, right? Inundated with these messages. Now, without painstakingly reading both of these, I can promise you the end conclusion is exactly the same, right? It's just the formulation of these two. So on the right-hand side, if you were to ask the average American, they're going to tell you any day of the week, give me the email on the right. Why? Because we adhere to the keep it short and simple principle, or in other cases, keep it simple, stupid. Right? However, if I've had the opportunity to live and work in Germany for the past 6 years, and if you talk to the average German, they're going to tell you, I'm not really concerned about the length of the email itself, right? What I want to know is, did you build up a solid line of argumentation? Did you present the facts and figures? Did you build a line of principles and reasoning? And if you did that, then I'll buy into your idea. But don't expect me to just accept your conclusion for no reason whatsoever, right? So this is a primary difference of theoretical cultures versus example-based cultures. And one of the fascinating points to this is why Twitter is such a popular platform in the US. Why? Because we look for the bottom line immediately. We want to see the result. Twitter provides us with a platform to do so. In other cultures and theory-based cultures, Twitter, not so popular. If you ask the average German or the average individual from a theory-based culture what they think about Twitter, they're going to say, you really expect me to present my thoughts in 140 characters or less? Not going to happen, right? So this is the first key awareness. And did you see what I just did? Did you see what I just did? I just introduced this concept to you with an example. Being an American, of course, this is how I'm most likely going to do it. But I want you to think about yourselves. How would you prefer to teach this? How would you prefer to convey this? Are you theory or example-based? And I want to give you an example. I want to take you back to a time in my life when my dad credits me for a majority of his hair loss, and that's 10th grade geometry class. Take a look at this formula. We've all seen this before. Pythagorean theorem, right? We've all seen this before. I want you to think, if you were the teacher, how would you present this? What would you do? Would you start with the theories? Would you start with the underpinnings? Would you introduce the elements first? Or would you start with a real-life example and then break it down from that point forward? I think back to a time in my life, 1999, and this is really a good example from media, popular media culture. At the age of 17, I made the very wise financial decision to watch Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, 7 times in theaters. Probably not a great idea for a kid who's trying to save up money to go to university. But there's one situation that I think highlights this concept perfectly. You remember Liam Neeson, a.k.a. Qui-Gon Jinn, is trying to sell to Yoda and the Jedi Council that Anakin Skywalker, a.k.a. Darth Vader, is the chosen one. So Qui-Gon Jinn's approach is based on the example. He's basing his argumentation on observation. He's saying he's really good at racing pod racers. He's got the highest midi-chlorian count. Oh, and by the way, he was born without the help of a father. And Yoda says something, he said, well, hold up. Issues this child has. I'm paraphrasing now. Issues this child has. I don't know. I sense a lot of fear in him. And then he states one of the most famous and impactful quotes in the annals of modern Star Wars history. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Do you see what he's doing? He's building it with a theoretical line of reasoning. If this child is fearful, this could lead to feelings of anger. Anger could generate sentiments of hate. And hate could lead to suffering for the all organic life forms within the galaxy. So probably not a good idea to anoint this kid the chosen one. He might single-handedly take down all life forms within the whole galaxy. So, interestingly enough here, we've only covered one part of our civilization worldwide, the Western cultures. What about in the Eastern cultures? What about in the Asian cultures? How can we best align and best produce a solid line of argumentation to bring them on board with our ideas? So what I want to do is I want to highlight this through a classic example. In the West, we're very much focused on our individual achievements, on our individual accomplishments. Right? We're focused on facts, figures, tasks, expectations, go down the list. And then from that point forward, we build up. Just think about the famous quote from Neil Armstrong, 1969 lunar landing. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. We're very much focused on that one small step in the West. But in the East, they're more so concerned about the one giant leap for mankind, the big picture. And whereas we start with the salient facts and figures, with the individualistic elements, and we move our way up until we reach the big picture. In the East, in Asia, they start with that big picture. This is truly the holistic universe, right? And guess what? We see examples of this everywhere, not just in business, not just in the university setting as well. Just think, if I had a friend here studying at University of Michigan, Dearborn, we'll call him Max Mustermann, that's the German version of John Doe, and I want to write him, for his birthday, a postcard. How am I going to address that? Well, I'm firstly going to start with, obviously, his first name. Then I'm going to move down to the street number, street name, then finally city, state, zip code, and then if I'm writing it from Germany, USA as well. Does it work that way in China? I had the opportunity to live for several years in China. I have several friends there as well. If I wanted to write one of them, Mr. Daniel Wu, in the audience, how would they address a postcard in this case? They actually do it completely from the opposite spectrum. They start firstly with the country. Then they move down to the province, the city, the street number, and finally the name itself. So it works in the opposite direction. And guess what? Theoretically, there's a lot of research to back this up. Right down the street here at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, Professor Richard Nesbitt and his team have done a lot of work into this. What they did is they took two test groups, a test group of Japanese participants and a test group of American participants. And what they did is they asked them to take a photo of a subject sitting in a chair. How would you do it? On average, the Americans took this photo, a close-up, right? And when asked why, they said, well, you asked me to take a picture of the subject. So the subject is the subject's face. In almost every single situation, the Japanese did it completely opposite. They started with a big picture approach, with a wide angle. And when asked why, they said, we can never truly understand the individual until we understand the environment that they occupy around them. So it's the opposite effect in that case. So at the end of the day, the second key awareness in this case is, do you start with the big picture in your persuasion methodologies, or do you start with the analytic view? So what do we do? What do we do in this case? Right? We've already discussed as well 215 billion emails flying around us every single day from all corners of the earth. Right? So we do have an extremely limited amount of time to get people on board with our ideas. And as we mentioned, we also have the complexity of a highly international society, an intercultural society. So you can forget about a one-size-fits-all approach. And all of these persuasion tactics that we learn in seminars and books, right, about, for example, building rapport and using anger purposely and complimenting sincerely, right? These work great in the American culture. And they work great in the cultures in which they were developed. They could work great in other cultures as well. but still yet they could prove to be wildly ineffective or even dangerous at the end of the day. So we have to take a culturally adaptive approach. We have to keep in mind there's other preferences, there's other tendencies through which these individuals in other cultures work. And when we can do this successfully, what we can do is we can build a more unified, a more successful, a more efficient, a more collaborative, and a more enjoyable place to occupy at the end of the day. So my question for you is, what's your big picture? Cultural awareness does matter. Thank you.